You are listening to the Cat Breeder Sensei Says podcast, the show that supports the reputable breeding of pedigree cats. I'm your show host, April Catito, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about how to handle multiple litters that are on the ground at the same time. If you have 3 or more girls, it's definitely going to come upon you that you're going to have more than one litter that is on the ground at the same time. So they could either be born on or around the same date, or they could be a couple of weeks apart, especially during kitten season when things start heating up and your girls start coming into season more often. Having a protocol in place will help you plan for stress-free deliveries and stress-free raising of the kittens, both for you, the kittens, and your queens. In this episode, we're going to discuss some of the different options that you have, and we'll dive into that right after this short message.
Do you want to learn how to become a successful breeder of pedigree cats? Now you can. For the first time ever, enroll in an online training course that takes you step by step through everything you need to know to get on the right track. Visit catbreedersensei.com to sign up today and use code podcast21 to get $25 off.
Okay, we are back, and you know I'm going to give you my disclaimer. All of the information that you hear in this episode is based on my personal experience or my personal knowledge. As a pedigree cat breeder, you may certainly have a different experience than I do. So you're probably wondering why I say the disclaimer before we get into the meat of every episode, and it's really because I know how it is out there. Anytime anybody expresses an opinion of how they run their cattery, people love to judge and attack, and I don't know, it's ugly and I don't like it. So I just put a disclaimer out there that, hey, I'm just putting it out there about my personal experiences, and the best way to do things are your way. So you can take what you learned from these episodes and what other information you can gather from other experienced breeders and, come up with your own way to run your cattery. I mean, it's yours to do whatever you would like, and it's really no one's business how you do things. So that's why I put the disclaimer in every show, just for those people who want to maybe not have something so nice to say about the content that are in the show. So hopefully we are continuing with our mission to have a positive community for the pedigree cat breeders, because it is a very much needed space. So let's move on with our intended content for this show, which is handling multiple litters at one time. So I actually have a couple of personal experiences that I'm going to share with you in this show, because they've both been very, very different. Now, if you have a nursery set up for your kittens, and I think for the most part you do, you probably have a little area set aside for your queens to raise their babies. Now, I see a lot of people keeping kittens in their bedrooms and stuff, so I'm not real sure how handling multiple litters like that would work, because personally I have never tried to do that. So if you are one of the people that have limited space and you're sharing your bedroom with your litters of kittens and your moms, then reach out to me and I would love to hear how you handle that. Maybe we can have you on a show and share how you handle that with our listeners as well. I just personally haven't had that experience, so that's not one that I will be talking about in this episode. So what we're going to be talking about in this show is really for people who have a designated nursery. Sometimes it could be a den, a basement, a bedroom, whatever is a specific area that is just for your queens and her litters, birthing room, whelping, all the way up to, they're running around playing, getting ready to go home. So that's what we're actually going to discuss. I have a bedroom that is set up for my nursery. That's all that's in there. If it's just one litter, then that's super easy, right? They have the whole room to themselves. I don't have to share the space with anybody. I don't have to worry about moms being angry with each other or kittens, sharing bacteria, etc. It's one litter is easy. And it's the easiest way, of course, to handle any litter is if you just have one. But sometimes, and even intentionally, you have multiple litters at the same time. So how are you going to manage your space? Well, I'll talk about 3 different scenarios. The first one is your moms are sharing the same room or the same space. So there's pros and cons to this. And really, based on the queens, it can be hit or miss, right? They could totally love each other and be besties, or they could totally not like each other and just want to fight. So that's, one extreme or the other. In the example that I have to share with you, I had a pair of queens that were besties, and I knew that they got along. They were always together, always snuggling, and never any incidences. So they actually co-parented their litters in the same space. They shared the same space. They nursed each other's kittens. They were born exactly 1 week apart, so they were very close in age. And it was really very beautiful to watch these 2 queens who were very accepting of each other and willing to share their kittens with one another. When I mated them close to the same time or within a week of each other, I did have the intent of co-parenting, but I did not know if it was going to work out well. Because at that time, I wasn't sure how the sharing of space was even going to work out. But, that was my plan, and I stuck to it. And so the first queen was delivering her kittens, and the other queen was still pregnant. Of course, she had about 1 week left to go. And the queen that was delivering her babies was in her birthing box, and her friend, her bestie, was right there with her. She was in the box with her. She was licking her head and cleaning her, and she just would not, it was hard to even get her out of there. She was like, no, this is my bestie, and I'm gonna stay I'm here for the stay. As gross as it sounds, she even ate the placenta that the mom delivered. So they were all about it. They were tight like that, and they did share their kittens, and it was great. There were no baby stealers. They didn't steal each other's babies. One had her birthing box, the other had hers, and they visited each other, and they would lay with each other's kittens, and it worked out very well. When that's not going to work out, when you're co-parenting or sharing space, is if those 2 females don't get along and they're very protective of their kittens, they'll fight, and they'll charge, and they'll attack. And I have not had one that does that yet, but I do prefer to keep them separated, although I did this co-parenting once. I attempted it a second time with the same 2 moms, and one was a baby stealer. The first girl delivered her kittens, and the second mom would just go over there before she delivered hers and steal them. And she would just, she was obsessed. And this was in the reverse order. So the second time it was the other mom who went first. And so, the behavior of my other queen was a little different when she was second in line. So they have these hormones that take over their body when they get very close to birthing, and that's what allows them to sometimes accept other kittens from other litters, and they'll nurse them, and they have no problem. They're very nurturing, and maybe that was part of the reason why she was stealing babies. She heard them crying or meowing, and she would just go over there, and she wanted to take them out and move them and take care of them herself. And that made me a little nervous. I didn't want that stressing out the first mom. So I did end up separating those, and they didn't co-parent a second litter together. So there's a stress factor that is involved when a mom has her kittens. I really like to keep the birthing area and the nursery just private, just private and quiet, especially for the first several weeks that the kittens are there. Just give the mom a chance to nurture them because she's in there with them a lot. So all kinds of things will stress out a mom. It can be people, it can be noises, it can be other cats. There's just so many things, and that will, trigger the cat to maybe want to move her kittens to a new location, or there's even, worse things that can happen if she's stressed out. So we really want to eliminate any stress factors when you have a new mom with her babies. Another disadvantage of co-parenting is when they're too far apart with the dates that they are born, and then they start to grow up, and then the older ones are too big. They're too rough. So when both litters start to walk around and they're starting to play on their own, if a kitten that's 3 weeks bigger or older, could potentially be too rough with the younger babies. So you have to make sure that that's not going to happen. Even if you get to like 5 weeks older, well, that's a huge difference in size. Be mindful of that. And then also infectious diseases. So as much as we don't like it and we don't want to ever see anything like that in our catteries or affecting our cats or our kittens, it happens. When you are a pedigree cat breeder, you are going to deal with infectious diseases and viruses and weird things that happen to your kitties, and it's just part of it, and it sucks, believe me. You never know when it's going to strike. So if you're co-parenting or you're sharing a space with kittens or with moms that have babies, and one of them or one of the litters catches the bug, guess what? Everybody's going to have it. So you can eliminate that spread by just keeping them separate and not sharing space like that. So their immune systems are very vulnerable when they're young, up until the point that they've had their full set of vaccines. It's just too risky to be around other cats and other kittens, in my opinion, to eliminate the spread of anything like viruses or diarrhea, parasites, anything that you may be faced with that comes up. So the second option is to take your one room and separate it with a divider or a wall, and that's where I'm at right now. So I have a 10 by 12 bedroom, and I've literally cut it in half, and there's 2 nurseries inside one bedroom. Both sides are equipped with everything that the moms need, everything that the kittens need. They have birthing tents. They have their litter boxes, they have their cat toys and their trees, and everything is just set up for an entire litter of kittens. So they have about 60 square feet each to birth and raise their kittens, and that's plenty of room. So to create the 2 spaces, it took a lot of thinking about how to do this. I didn't really want to build a permanent wall. I mean, this is still my home. It's where I live. I don't want to put a lot of holes in the walls. I'm weird like that. So my husband and I came up with a plan to kind of put up a temporary / semi-permanent wall, and it works amazing. We have a foldable, it's like an accordion room divider, and he built a frame, and there's 2 of them actually, and it was like a perfect fit to go across the room to cut it in half. And then, we made a door and we put locks on it. So kind of hard to describe, but we had to get creative to make this wall. We looked at so many things too, like IKEA hacks and putting bookshelves in there, and so many things we looked at just building an entire wall, and I didn't really want to do that. So we did come up with this simple solution, and so far it's working. Amazing. I love it. Everybody is stress-free. They are very happy in their space. So I like the fact that I can take my one room, and I've created 2 different nurseries, and that is way easier for me to manage 2 litters at a time. I have 2 litters in there right now. One was born 4 weeks ago, and the other one was born 2 days ago. So big difference in age, a lot of different things going on in those age ranges, but the separation of the room is just been a game changer. It is much needed so long ago. I mean, trust me, I have struggled with how to divide the space up for a while, and just tried to manage my matings and the dates that they were mated, and that's, sometimes a struggle too, getting those dates right and thinking, okay, well, these kids will be going home by this date, so I won't mate her until here, and then by the time she's leaving, I can move the next mom into the room. That's kind of chaotic, especially when the timing doesn't work out like you want it to. So I love the one room that's separated into 2 different nursery spaces for 2 litters of kittens. And depending on how big your room is, you could split it up into even more spaces. So you gotta kind of dig and get to your creative brain and think, how do I want to split this up? Take your room and, divide it into different sections is an awesome idea for keeping everybody in their own little area. And then a third option, which I have never tried, and this is the one that, will probably get some comments, but there are things called queen cages. And as much as people don't want to admit it, a lot of cat breeders use them. So they're caged areas, and they're stacked on top of each other, and they're about 4 foot to 5 foot wide. I think they're 24 inches deep and maybe 27 to 30 inches high. And they're called queen cages. They have little birthing boxes. They have litter box trays. They're easy to clean and disinfect, and it keeps the kittens and the mom contained for as long as you need them to. So a lot of the cageless breeders are totally against that. They do not want to cage their kittens or their moms. And I don't particularly like the queen cages either. But again, I've not tried them. So I could be missing out on like the solution that I needed a long time ago. Because no matter what anyone says, the kittens need to be contained into a space. And it's just a fact. They start out in a birthing box or a tent, and they're contained in this little space, and everything is fine because they're super tiny and they're just kind of crawling around. And then they start hobbling around, they start walking around a little bit, and they don't really have any desire to leave their birthing area until they're about 3 weeks old. And then they want to get out and they want to start leaving the nest and exploring the world. And for me, that's still too young. I want them to stay in a safe area until they are litter trained. So they'll get out and they'll pee on everything in their path, and they will poop anywhere, even in their food bowls. They'll do that if you have them in a playpen too. So they need to be contained. So there's different options for this. We talked about this in another episode about setting up your nursery. You can have playpens, you can have tents, whatever you want to call it. They're all little containment areas. And then once they're old enough and they're potty trained, which is usually around, fully litter trained, 6 weeks old for some, 7 weeks old, 8 weeks old. At that age, yes, they can have free roam of the space. They can have free roam of your house if you choose that. They're old enough to be independent and be given more freedom to not be contained into a space. The queen cages do that. And when I first started, I went to a breeder's house and I wanted to see her setup. And I didn't know what to expect. I had no expectations. I was not familiar with anything, or any way. I may have even been kind of in the herd mindset of no cages. Oh my God, you cage your cats. Oh God, Well, I went into her home. It was very nice. Her females were free roaming in the home, and she showed me her kitten room. And she had wall-to-wall queen cages, and she had 2 litters on the ground at that particular time. One was about 4 weeks old, so they were not litter trained. They were just old enough to get up and really run around and play and wrestle with each other. And they were in the top queen cage. And then there was a second litter that was 7 weeks old, and they lived in the room. So they lived in this nursery, and they were raised in the queen cage, but now they were old enough to come out. So they were not in the cage. They were on the ground. They were running all around, all over my feet, etc. So at first, I admit, I was like, oh, you keep them in a cage? Oh, well, I was being kind of judgy. But then, once you actually start having litters of kittens and you see the need to contain them in something, those don't sound like such a bad idea. They're expensive. I think they're, the least expensive one that I can find is about $1,400. I think the website is mycatcages.com, and they have all kinds of different ones, but their queen cages specifically is what I'm talking about. It's actually for birthing and raising kittens to a certain age. I'm gonna say don't knock it till you try it. Anytime you hear about breeders who cage kittens, it's always this really bad, ugly stigma and you see this picture in your head like they're just in the worst conditions and they're all crammed in there like, I don't know, chickens and chicken coops that are on chicken farms. That's kind of what at least for me, that's kind of what I feel like when I hear that. But that's not always the case, right? So when I visited this breeder and I got a picture of what these cages actually, they serve a purpose, then I had a different feeling about them. And I have considered getting these more times than not. Like every time I have multiple litters, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need queen cages. But I still am, working on a different method. So I use, either a birthing tent or a kennel for the birthing area, and they stay there until they're about 4 weeks old, and then we litter train them, and then they come out and they have free roam of their space. So that's my way. That's the best way for me. But I'm always open to hear a better solution. And really, my goal is to keep the kittens safe. And that means safe from their environment. That means safe from viruses. And it means safe from whatever safe means. It just means keep these babies safe until I feel like they're old enough to kind of look out for themselves, I guess. I mean, they still get into so much mischief. I had one case where he's free in the room, a kitten about 9 weeks old, and he was playing with the door jamb for whatever reason, because they do that, and he was pawing at it, and he got his claw stuck in the door jamb. And luckily, I heard him meowing, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound right. So I went in there. Of course, he couldn't get his claw out. It wasn't a major catastrophe. I just pulled it out for him because he, I guess, didn't know to retract or to lift up on it. But it's little things like that you really don't think about until you see it happen. Then you're like, man, I can't have anything around these babies because they get into everything. So containing your kittens, it really is protecting them. I talked about clearly loved pets. They're beautiful, clear plexiglass kennels are their playpens. And then people use kennels, like dog kennels, that have blankets and stuff in it. There's the tents, the pop-up pet tents. There's all kind of things that you can use to keep your baby safe. But we're really talking about handling the multiple litters. So the queen cages, back to that. Some of them have as many as 6 different areas for litters of kittens. So that's if you have a whole lot of cats and you need a whole lot of space for babies. So they have options, 2 cages on top of each other. Some of them are stacked 3 high, but maybe you can check it out. If you like it, that's great. If you don't, that's great too. The best way to do things, my friend, is your way. And as long as you're looking out for the best interests of your cats, your queens, and those babies until they make it into their new homes and are safe and sound, then your way is the best way. So don't let anyone intimidate you, make you feel like crap, or talk you out of something that you feel like is going to work for you. Do what's best for you and do what's best for those cats. As long as you're keeping their best interest at heart, then everything will be just fine. I do appreciate you so much for listening to this episode of Cat Breeder Sensei Says. The topic of the cages is, I know that's controversial, and again, I have no experience with it, but as long as everybody's caring for their babies and their cats, then, who am I to judge? I'm not. I'm here to support. I'm here to support people who are doing the right thing and being reputable. So, with that being said, I'm going to see you guys. Well, I won't see you, but I'll talk to you guys on the next episode of Cat Breeder Sensei Says. Do me a huge favor and leave me a review on the podcast platform that you listen to this show on. That can be one of the best things that you can do for me today, is go leave us a review. Go leave us a positive review and let me know how the show is helping you in your journey as a pedigree cat breeder. Okay? Until next time, guys, make good choices, and I'll see you later. Bye.